All right, welcome back to Cyber for Hire, the Managed Security Podcast. Once again, I'm Bradley Barth with SC Media. In the first half of our show, we talked about helping your MSSP clients build and develop their own internal cybersecurity culture. That conversation featured Ryan Jameson at Redacted. If you haven't watched it yet, you might want to find some time to go back and watch that at some point. But right now, I'd like to welcome back my co-host Ryan Morris from Morris Management Partners, because it's time for us to examine our MSSP industry topic of the day. Presenting our big idea in business: is regulatory compliance governing your tool sets and policies? To what extent should compliance with privacy and security frameworks, whether imposed by government bodies or industry standard organizations, be the decisive factor when MSSPs choose their tech stacks and craft their threat defense strategies? Meanwhile, are would-be MSSP customers deciding which managed services provider to hire largely based on their compliance needs, or are they more influenced by other market forces and threat trends? And for those organizations who are building their managed services strategies around compliance, which frameworks, laws, or standards should be highest priority? This segment is going to offer some important perspectives on all of these key questions. So, Ryan, as always, let's jump right into it. One thing that I think we've all heard a lot in this industry is that compliance, of course, doesn't necessarily equal secure. Compliance is in many cases, minimum standards that you need to meet in order to not perhaps be held liable by a particular regulatory organization, or it's a good starting point. And yet there are probably a lot of clients out there, or potential MSSP clients, that when they first are initially looking for help, for outsourcing help, compliance might be their first objective. And is that okay? Or is it up to the MSSP to be a little bit of the adult in the room and say, you're going to want to go above and beyond compliance because compliance doesn't equal security?
That is the first and most important takeaway. Compliance does not equal security, but it is absolutely necessary to ensure consistency and thoroughness in terms of the way that we address things like cybersecurity. Flashback, if you will, to your days in high school. If the principal came on the loudspeaker and said, "We have a new rule and it's about X, Y, or Z," right? I remember this happened when I was a junior in high school. They came out and the new rule was about the length of the shorts you could wear to school, because apparently somebody had an issue with seeing somebody's kneecaps or something, right? They came out and they read us the rule. What do you think the reaction was from all of the teenagers in that building? It was not compliance. It was, "Oh, really? You think you can force me to do something even if it is the right thing to do?" And we spent an entire school year kind of thrashing around the ideas of what you could do and what you couldn't do, and literally got to the point where students would carry in their pockets a cloth measuring tape, so that if somebody stopped them in the halls and said, "I think your shorts are too short," they could instantly whip out the measuring tape and actually show them that no, it is within 2 inches of the top of my kneecap, and therefore it's silly. It's immature. It is ridiculous, but it is also utterly predictable. Now, I say that to make sure everybody understands why I am such a very big proponent of government regulations, standards, and compliance requirements in all things technology, but especially in cybersecurity. Now, that might sound completely disconnected to you guys based on what my personal opinion is and what my personal experiences have been, and yet what I think we need to do professionally. I think there are so many attacks, there are so much variability in terms of tech stacks and best practices and the way that we do our jobs, that it is absolutely illogical to assume that a million cybersecurity pros will do a million things, all not the same way, but good enough that we won't have any problems. So my fundamental position here is, we've been saying to people for decades, cybersecurity is important. What we do over here, it's not just trivia. This is a mission critical part of your business operation. Well, guess what? They agree. They believed us. And because we are mission critical now, it is no longer optional that we measure up to certain standards. Now, it doesn't mean all the standards are good. It absolutely does not mean all of the imposed regulations and compliance frameworks are actually effective. But what I will say is it will come to our industry more and more as we go. Either we choose to move along and shape and influence those things, or else we're going to be the ones who are left outside, because regulation is the future of our industry.
All right. So if you have then some organizations that, at least as a starting point, commence their relationship with an MSSP with the explicit purpose of being compliant with regulation. That's at least their number one goal. They want to at least start with that. Are you finding that this market demand to be compliant is actually starting to shape the strategies that a lot of MSSP firms are adopting in terms of the various tool sets and services that they're putting together? What do you think of that as a strategy, as an MSSP that wants to be basically build their strategies around the goal of compliance versus, let's say, trying to shoot for above compliance standards?
It's you and I understand the logic of that conversation, and it should be the first step in the process, right? Let's start with the basics. Let's reach the fundamentals, and then in an agile, incremental way, we can get a little bit better at a time. And yet, for reasons that are also probably rooted in teenage psychology, that compliance approach, if that is the first engagement that we try to have with a client, what we find is that it's only motivational, it's only compelling enough to get the customer to spend money if they have recently been subject to some enforcement, to a penalty for failure to comply, right? It's that, you should be able to learn from other people's experience of, you don't need to touch the hot stove. You just learn from other people's experience touching the hot stove. But it doesn't work like that in cybersecurity. And it goes all the way back to some of our original frameworks, right? If you think of, the granddaddy of HIPAA, and you think of the old financial regulations and compliance framework of Sarbanes-Oxley, and you get into the genesis of the PII regulations, personally identifiable information. All of those were well-intentioned. They were well-designed in theory, right? They were designed to accomplish what we thought we were trying to accomplish. And there was zero enforcement. There was no penalty. And as a result, everybody said, oh yeah, you know what? You tell me when another medical clinic, doctor's office, hospital, etc., has to pay $1 million fine for failing to comply with HIPAA, and then I'll start to pay attention. And so then we came back and we said, okay, here's one who just paid a penalty. And they said, yeah, it's not going to happen to me, right? They just aren't compelled as business thinkers to prevent future pain in that way in the cybersecurity industry. I actually would recommend that you approach it from completely the other way around. How do we attach cybersecurity and detailed policies and procedures to our ability to accomplish our commercial objectives, right? In other words, what is it about your relationship as a business with the people who pay you cash money for your products or services that might be vulnerable to a cyber threat, right? Is it the transaction on credit cards? Is it the transfer of personally identifiable information for credit checks or other things like that? What's at risk there that might make somebody not want to do business with you? How do we shore that up enhance your commercial performance ability, and then we will get a little bit better. And honestly, what we've found is that the most effective way to position compliance in the mind of the customer is, let's solve your customer problem. Let's institute repeatable and scalable policies. Oh, by the way, once we've done those things, when it comes to compliance, you won't even have to think twice about it because it will already be true. We're not here to get you compliant with regulations. We're here to make sure that your business can operate effectively. Oh, by the way, you will also be compliant. It's upside down logic, and yet that's the way the customers are deciding.
Well, that certainly makes sense, Ryan. Now, when it comes to various MSSP services and solutions that hopefully will achieve compliance as one of its benefits, there's sort of two ways to look at it. You have your various services that might be needed to fulfill certain obligations as dictated by regulations, right? Like, for example, you might have something, you might go to an MSSP and rely on them for outsourcing incident response to make sure that you're conducting breach notifications in a timely manner as stipulated by certain data breach and data privacy laws and regulations. Then you actually also have actual solutions and services that are specifically categorized as cybersecurity compliance monitoring solutions, solutions that are specifically designed to help organizations design policies and security programs around the various laws and regulations that pertain to them. What does the market look like in the MSSP space for compliance monitoring solutions? Is that an area that MSSPs have been historically strong in? Is that an area where they could actually stand to increase their services in the market?
It's a great point to focus on, because you would think, logically speaking, that it should be a practice area of equal stickiness with the customers that are also paying us to actually run their cybersecurity operations. And yet, historically, those two things have been completely disconnected. The best way that we've heard it described is that when you hire an MSSP and then you hire them again to monitor their own performance, you're probably not getting the most objective analysis of whether things are being done well. As a result, those two things being sold in the same portfolio to the same customers by the same service provider, we're actually getting a lot of pushback on that, right? The customers are just not necessarily going to expand all the way across. Those that have what we will consider to be a freestanding audit and compliance function, that can and is in many cases a business unto itself, right? Think about, like, in the business of accounting, the big six accounting firms, they have financial accounting, they have legal accounting and compliance, they have tax accounting, and then they have auditing and compliance. And in almost every case, what you will find is that it's not just an organizational boundary, it is a fundamental information, organization, communication, interaction boundary, right? The practice for auditing, it's a whole different group of humans. They might even come in under a different brand. And ironically, it might be a very good way to get your foot in the door with the customers of your competitors, because hiring somebody to watch the watchers, who's going to monitor the monitors, to borrow a phrase from an old movie, that is something that we all want to have better services, but I can't necessarily hire my hall monitor to monitor himself, right? Like that's just that just breaks the bounds. So my advice is, let's break those things into separate operating divisions. Let's go after not our install base as the first target audience for auditing and compliance services. And you will find there is massive need and requirement. There's a very lucrative business in that specific practice area, but not when it is integrated as part of your overall stack. Your overall stack can say, I can get you to the point of compliance, but the auditing, monitoring, and the ongoing kind of reporting for compliance validation, that should be a separate group. So let's use it as a way to go hunt the rest of the marketplace, and then we'll come back in here with a freestanding, independent, reliably separate organization, and then maybe we can start to monitor from a cousin perspective, not so much a sibling perspective.
Yeah, really interesting point, Ryan, on that. Before we wrap, I just want to ask you, from your experience, what regulations right now would you identify as being the ones that are particularly driving market demand the most for various MSSP services? Which are the ones that are, really getting the customer bases out there going, we need some outsourcing help because, we want to make sure that we don't get, in trouble with the governing bodies that are going to be, watching everything that we do? What would be at the top of the list?
You know what? Right now, there are multiple things that I don't think have gelled into a specific framework that are associated with data privacy, and that is an area that people feel very emotional about right now. The tracking and personalization and privacy issues, and as a result, I think that's going to get a whole lot more attention, and it is going to be something that drives both a change in customer behavior and opportunity for the MSSP community. On an aspirational level, I will say something like SOC 2. I think it's got great logic. I think that there's really smart thinking that's gone into that framework, but at the top of it, it says this is a voluntary framework. It's not yet the law. I think it will become much more stringent in the near future. And that's a place where, again, it's a voluntary set of standards for better practice that isn't here to scold and scare our customers, but rather to kind of motivate them to higher aspirations. I think that that's a very effective framework for people getting into. And then I would just kind of close with the, again, further aspirational stuff that we've just heard in the White House announcement about the national cybersecurity policies. None of those are laws yet, but they are about to become laws because they are not only, I think, interesting and valuable approaches to improving the kind of just the baseline of cybersecurity, but they're in the news and they are popular and they are emotional. And that means legislators are going to get involved and they don't understand cybersecurity the way that we do. So my advice is don't just figure out how to comply with the laws that are there. Let's do the Wayne Gretzky thing and skate to where the puck is going to be and go influence what the future regulations are about to be and design them in a way that a practitioner would design them, right? Not the way that a politician would, but the way that a professional would agree this is the better way to solve our problems. We'll get much better performance for our customers if we can influence those situations, but also we can just eliminate, like, I don't know, a gajillion dollars of legal fees in challenging things that were well-intentioned but not well-designed or implemented, which has historically been the track record of government compliance and regulations programs. So let's shape the future and admit it's going to make us all better. All right, guys. So that is our thought on this big topic of the day. What do you guys think? Right? What are your thoughts on cybersecurity regulation and whether that should be the dog or the tail in the market conversation? Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear that kind of feedback. cyber4hire@cyberriskalliance.com. That is our email inbox. And you can also reach us on the comments page via our show page. We would love to know what's going on out there and how you guys are actually thinking about this stuff. So at this point, let's transition into our next element on the program. The next element here is going to be our Dear Cyber for Hire segment. This is an advice column. It is a relationship management venue where we get the opportunity to play marriage counselor between MSPs and their clients and help perhaps to mend some fences when relationships go awry. So the topic we're going to be talking about here today, it is real. It is something that you deal with every day. But we're going to change the names to protect the innocent. So, Bradley, how about set us up here? Tell us what's going on in relationships with MSPs these days.
Yeah. Happy to fill you in there, Ryan, because we are back, as always, with even more juicy MSSP melodrama. And this one comes from the provider side of the relationship. And so, guys, cue the music. Dear Cyber for Hire, I used to think a sense of humor is a quality you'd want in a partner. But all my client ever does is humor me now. As in not taking anything I say seriously. Oh, sure, they nod their head and say, yes, they agree with my recommendations. They claim to be on the same page, but then they don't actually follow through on their commitments. It's all empty promises and procrastination. And when your significant other does nothing but humor you all day, you start to feel like the punchline of a bad joke. Tell me, Cyber for Hire, what do I do when the word yes is just a nicer way of saying no, or maybe later? Can you help me with this funny business? Please say yes and actually mean it. Sincerely, Laughingstock in Lansing. Ryan, we've heard things like the concepts of quiet quitting and bare minimum Mondays, right? These concepts of kind of coasting through your job, doing the minimum of what's required of you without actually investing any extra energy into your role or responsibilities. Are these false yeses the MSSP client equivalent of that?
Yes, they are. And yes, it's a problem. I'll go back to the good old days, right? I grew up in my early days in business. We were taught the concept of a pocket veto. And what they meant was exactly the same thing that we're talking about here. The yes objection. Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's a really good idea. In the meeting, while I'm talking to you, I totally agree with everything you are saying. And as soon as you leave the room, I put it in my pocket and I veto that, and I never change my behavior. That is not a new problem, but it is absolutely exaggerated in a cybersecurity environment, right? Like if we have people who aren't fully engaged and they are quiet quitting their jobs, that's unfortunate. That's expensive, and that's going to be kind of a net subtraction from the overall culture of the organization. But it's a question of productivity, not necessarily a question of, whoops, we just exposed all of our customer credit card numbers and we're about to get sued into oblivion, right? These things have consequences that are very high. And so I think what we need in the industry is a little bit more training around the concept of ask and receive for either agreement or rejection, right? And what I mean by this is we have to be deliberate, right? It can't just be, hey, this was a great meeting. Guys, we talked about a lot of good things. Thanks. Let us know if we need anything else. Because did you notice that I didn't actually say, will you do this thing that we talked about? Okay. That has to be explicit. And we might not want to get told no, and we might not want to be abrupt or blunt about things. And it doesn't have to be, right? This doesn't have to be a negative thing in our environment, but there must be an explicit ask and answer. Will you do this thing? And the best lesson in negotiation that I was ever taught when I was coming up through the ranks was once you put the ask out there, whoever talks next is not in charge of the negotiation. Okay. Whoever talks first loses control. I don't mean that in a bad way, and I'm not saying control in a way of like forcing people to do things. What I'm saying is it's about leverage and momentum. It's about leadership in a relationship. If I say to you, Bradley, will you do this thing? And then you're going to
Absolutely.
go,
Oh, darn. Now I'm not in control anymore.
see,
You got me.
exactly. Exactly, right? If I say, will you do this thing? And then you pause for a second. And then I go, and because the reason I ask, and then what it was, I completely kneecapped my credibility and my leadership in this relationship. You got to ask yourself, why do we do that as service providers? Why is it that we ask for things, but we allow people to tell us the yes objection, and then later on we complain about them when we're not in the same room? Why does that happen? Right? It is the fear of rejection. It is the fear of taking what is right now a good relationship and introducing conflict, because if they say no, okay, well, what does that mean? What do we do about this, and how do we move forward? Well, the answer is we don't move forward when we can't get to agreement on things that are absolutely necessary, right? Tactical approach to this. First thing is you have to separate in your own mind what is a nice to have and what is a must have in the things you are asking your clients to do. If it is a must have, then it must be agreed upon. And I have seen many service providers actually go to the level of saying, this is a thing that we believe is necessary. It is our recommendation. Will you agree to do it? If the client says, we're going to take a look at it, we're not going to do it, they actually will push across the table a piece of paper, a declination letter, a memo of some form in just slightly less than really offensive legalese writing that says, I have been informed about this by my service provider. At this point, I have declined to accept this offer or to pursue this stuff, and I release my service provider from responsibility or accountability, and I assume full accountability for this situation. It's amazing how much that causes people to go, wait a second, are you saying this is actually that serious? And the answer is, yeah, that's exactly what we're saying. It has to be taken seriously, or else we cannot do the work that we've been hired to do. Lather this through your culture, right? Think about it in terms of your personality, the people that you employ, and then the relationships you have with your customers. But let's focus on the specific ask that yields a specific answer and is documented in quote unquote enforceable vehicles. That is the only way forward. And if people just never get held to that standard of accountability, you're going to ask 1,000 things and they're going to say yes to 1,000 things, and you will accomplish absolutely none of them. So let's be more deliberate about asking for an answer.
All right. Great advice, Ryan. I'm going to keep that one tip in my back pocket about, asking somebody to do something and waiting for them to answer before I speak up again. I'm going to use that at work at some point in time, and I'm just going to shut up and not say anything until the other person gives me a response. And if they don't, then we'll have a fun little awkward staring contest for a couple of minutes.
Sometimes silence is awkward, and that's exactly what's necessary. Right? You gotta be comfortable with discomfort.
That is very, very true. Well, hopefully our listeners have learned from this and don't make the same mistake. And remember, if you've been struggling with your managed security services relationship, whether you're the user or the provider, we want to hear from you. So please write to us at cyberforhire@cyberriskalliance.com, and we might use your letter in a future episode. All right, well, as any security practitioner can tell you, there's no shortage of headlines filling up the cyber news feeds every single day. So we wanted to highlight a few items that we curated just for you, and so we present the security detail. Ryan, as always, I'm going to have you lead off with headline number 1. Cloud security has a forest versus trees problem, according to a Palo Alto survey. Tell us more.
So the research that the folks at Palo Alto did was they were looking for the typical number of security tools or systems that are in active deployment in a customer environment. Obviously, that's going to vary based on the size of your organization, but their particular focus in this was to look at it in terms of cloud security, because, we like to think, hey, the provider, they provide security, but we still deploy our own. The number that that they found in the research for a typical mid-sized organization, right? So I will kind of peg that, more than 250 users, less than 1,000 users. In that size of an organization, the number was 60 different cybersecurity tools. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not an expert in 60 different tools, and I don't know how long it will take before I will be an expert in all of those things. And what that means is neither are your clients and neither are your service technicians, if that's the way that you guys are running. The fundamental advice is more tools does not make us more secure. It is better deployment of the tools that we already have and integrated approaches to a cybersecurity strategy that is governing all of the tools. One policy to rule them all, if you will. Headline number 2, Bradley, let's toss it back over to you. Security researchers have been targeted with new malware via job offers on LinkedIn. Ouch, that's not nice.
Oh, yeah. No, not nice at all. Mandiant earlier this month reported that it's been tracking a suspected North Korean-based spear phishing campaign targeting security researchers and media organizations with fake job offers that ultimately lead to malware installations. Some of this campaign echoes some past activity related to Operation Dream Job, which was another purported North Korean-based campaign, although the group here involved might be a little bit different, according to some research. What's basically happening is that the malicious actors are creating fake LinkedIn accounts posing as recruiters. Some of these accounts are very well designed and professionally curated. They're supposed to basically mimic the identities of legitimate users to really help increase credibility. And then what happens is that the malicious actors are then persuading their targets to then interact with them over WhatsApp, where they then deliver a phishing payload either directly over WhatsApp or through the target's email. In a lot of cases, the vehicle there is a Microsoft Word document embedded with macros. So again, we know right now there's a lot of opportunity out there in the cybersecurity market for jobs, and sometimes in your haste for finding new work, new advancement in your career, better money, you might be easily distracted and see one of these opportunities and jump at it. Make sure you know who you're dealing with. Think twice when you're approached with a job opportunity through a social media channel or through your email. All right, headline number 3. Telehealth provider Cerebral discloses a data breach that has been active since 2019.
So, an announcement recently from the folks at Cerebral, a telehealth provider of counseling, mental health, and other related services that since they were founded in October of 2019, they have been collecting customer names, phone numbers, email addresses, dates of birth, personally identifiable information, not limited to just who you are, but also inclusive of what are the challenges that you are having, how did you respond to a mental health survey, and what are your personal details in your health situation, what kinds of services you might have availed. Now, I'm not going to say that they shouldn't be capturing this information. It is, after all, the business that they are in. The problem is that they have been sharing all of that data from day one with their advertisers and with the mega tech platforms, right? They've included, or they had included, and just to give them credit, they made this announcement and said, yep, we've removed the code now that is, involved with the API and the information sharing for advertising, tracking, etc. That has been removed, and we believe that they have locked this up. But unfortunately, those big tech providers are under no legal obligation to delete or lose that information because it was given to them without them doing anything wrong. If you are a cybersecurity professional and you are working at a business that collects all of that information, stop what you're doing. Go back and look at your APIs, look at your ad tracking, look at the fundamentals of the information that you capture and how it is shared with third parties. And let's make sure you're not the next nasty headline, because this one's not going to end with a headline. It's going to end with a lawsuit from a whole lot of people, because this was a gnarly disclosure. It's unbelievable that these things still happen in our industry, and they do every single day. Headline number 4, Bradley, let me toss it back to you. March Patch Tuesday includes fixes for 2 exploited Microsoft 0 days. What's up in this situation?
Yeah, well, this is, again, as of our recording today on Thursday, March 16th. This just happened a couple of days ago. One of the 0 days is a critical Microsoft Outlook elevation of privilege vulnerability for Windows machines. According to Microsoft, an attacker could exploit this vulnerability by sending a specially crafted email, which triggers automatically when it is received and processed by the Outlook client. So this could lead to exploitation before the email is even viewed in the preview pane. So that means no user interaction involved, which is always a very dangerous thing. The email connects the victim to a remote URL and sends the Windows account's authentication protocol hash. Bleeping Computer reports that the 0 day exploit has been used by Russian group Fancy Bear since April 2022. The other actively exploited 0 day is a security feature bypass that's found in Windows Smart Screen cloud-based anti-malware service. Again, Bleeping Computer reports that the group behind the Magnaber ransomware has been actively exploiting this particular vulnerability. So patch, patch, patch yourself, patch your clients. That's all I have to say about that. And so that brings us to, finally, drum roll please, our irrelevant news item of the week. Now, this is a real news pitch that Ryan or I have received in our inboxes for reasons that are entirely inexplicable to us, but we'll see if somehow we can make it a little bit about cybersecurity. Are you ready, Ryan?
I am ready.
All right, this is another fun one. It goes a little something like this. Hi, Bradley. Handwritten notes used to be a common practice back in the day, but now that's usually reserved for the holidays or birthdays, and even then, we sometimes just sign our name to a card and don't write anything else. Even thank you notes have become extinct for many people. We're so out of practice, it can be challenging to even think about what to write. Artificial intelligence to the rescue. It can now help anyone who wants to send a note but just can't find the right words to tell Aunt Betty how much they liked the platter she bought from the wedding registry, or to say sorry to the neighbors for backing over their flower beds and taking out their mailbox. So would you be interested in putting the new hallmark of AI to the test and seeing how it can send birthday, thank you, and other types of notes for people? If so, then you should be talking to the folks over at Handwritten, HANDWRYTTEN. Now, Ryan, I'm not married, but you are. So I'm going to ask you, what would your wife say if you read her the most romantic love poem that you wrote on a card for Valentine's Day or your anniversary, and after tugging on her heartstrings like that, with a tear in her eye, you say, honey, so glad you liked it. Surprise, I had a robot write it for me. How would the rest of that conversation go, you think, Ryan?
Horribly and predictably. It is, sincerity is nice. Lack of sincerity is annoying. Feigned sincerity is upsetting. People will come after you if you fake these things. Now, here's my problem with this particular service that is being provided. I don't know if you, Bradley, or those that are listening in, if you remember into the way back in the early kind of conversations a few years ago that we were having about artificial intelligence and whether it was a good thing or not necessarily a good thing. There is a particular newsletter or a blog environment out there, a guy who writes something, and I'll give him a shout out, called Wait But Why. If you've not read the story about that was published at Wait But Why, Artificial Intelligence Revolution, and the role of a signature generating technology, if you've read it, you understand why I threw up in my mouth when Bradley was reading this. If you've not read it, you should go and Google that and go and read that thing and recognize that the well-intentioned objectives of a hand-signed note could literally be the downfall of humanity. Those are not my words. I am not the one who is freaking out and running with my hair on fire. I'm just saying it's been posited as a theory. I would never want to get caught with this artificial stuff in my relationship, Bradley. Again, sincerity is good. Lack of sincerity is bad. Fake sincerity, way worse.
Yeah, something tells me you present a card like that, you're going to be in the doghouse, and then you're going to be going back to the AI robot to have it write you an apology note. And then it's just going to be just like one big vicious circle. I personally, myself as a writer, I take pride in trying to come up with creative, funny things on people's cards. And yeah, like sometimes you do get a little bit of writer's block, and sometimes, you do want help, but that's the pride I take in writing something. I think of one time a couple of years ago, one of my cousins got married and they did a thing where it was like, oh, you're sitting at table 7. So I want you to write a note in this book we have on our table. And since you're table 7, we will read this note that you wrote to us 7 years from now on our 7-year anniversary. And so I took that as a challenge, and I was sitting there writing a whole thing, and I'm just sort of like, I'm making up things that happened. I'm like, congratulations, you survived the robot uprising of 2025, and your love still persisted through that. And then, and I'm coming up with like all these little, apocalyptic Armageddon scenarios that happen over the next few years, and how their love and their marriage sustained through all of that. And I'm like, they're probably going to think this is really stupid when they read this in 7 years, but I'm like, I'm having fun with it. So like, I don't want a machine being creative for me. So that's what I got to say about that.
And I will also say that it should be fun for you as well as for the person who receives it. And although in a now GPT-4 world, apparently the AI is getting better at feigning sincerity. So it doesn't just give you the answers, but it can sound nice. So watch out. You got to read twice to make sure a human actually wrote that thing.
Absolutely. And who knows, I was joking, being facetious in that wedding note, but maybe we really will end up having a robot uprising in 2025, the way things are going. And so with that, we're out of time. But don't worry, we'll be back again soon for episode number 14. Meanwhile, feel free to check out even more cybersecurity podcast content on the SC Media, MSSP Alert, and Channel E2E websites. Until next time, I'm Bradley Barth.
And I am Ryan Morris. We are here to continue this conversation about the business of cybersecurity. So please reach out to us via our show page and our email address at cyberforhire@cyberriskalliance.com and share with us any comments, questions, or insights that you have about the business of cybersecurity. And then we will keep the conversation going on the next episode of Cyber for Hire, your inside source for cyber outsourcing.